Hello, everybody, and what an exciting topic. It feels like in the program, everything is coming together now. So as we speak about conscious leadership and you ask these questions and Raj explains this, we hear John Mackey's perspective on growing a business, and we hear Susan's perspective on the consciousness of the leader and how you handle scale in your culture. Everything is coming together. And this leads us to a very important topic that not only will we spend the next 20 minutes on, but we will also, 25 minutes, we'll move into our small group and explore this even further. Every year, we're asking ourselves, our teams, our people to do more with less. And 2020 was definitely no exception to that rule. In fact, I would say it was an acceleration of the pace of change and the amount of adaptation we were asking ourselves, our companies, our teams to adapt to. So while all these aspects of leadership are relevant, I feel that today one of the most important is our relationship to burnout. The concept of burnout, to the concept of our own capacity, to the idea around whether we draw or do not draw physical, mental, emotional, social, and work boundaries in our lives, as well as some spiritual boundaries. This is impacting all of us. So right now we're on Zoom. And if you think about it, how has that impacted our ability to have meetings and do all of these things? In fact, now we've given up our transit time, right? The amount of time in between events. Has that allowed you more space and ease? Or has that actually had you squeeze in an extra Zoom meeting, right? So only you know the answer to that. But my guess, if I am anything like a lot of the people that I work with, they say, in fact, it has caused me to squeeze in extra work. I don't end at 5. I don't leave the office at 7. In fact, it's 24/7. And that makes our next topic incredibly important. So let's talk about burnout. And I will even go as far as to share my own story of burning out. And in this experience, this is back in my days as a doctor. I'll begin with this story, and then we will talk through what is burnout, how do you recognize it, both in yourself and in those you lead and love, because this may also be happening with people at home as well. For those of you in family-owned businesses, this is for people you love and lead together. So let's start with this day. I remember the day very clearly. It was June 17th, 2004. And I had been on service in the hospital since 6 a.m. I had been assigned as the doctor who was distributing all incoming patients to my colleagues. On top of that, I had 18 patients. And it was now 11 a.m. And at 11 a.m. in the morning, after 5 hours of being on service, I had only seen 2 of my patients. I had a very busy time, and I looked to the nurse and I said, Nina, could you please give the patient in room 636 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium? She looked back at me, somewhat bewildered, and said, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Why? Because that's the 4th time you've asked me that same question. I had no idea that I had asked it 3 previous times. And this in itself jarred me to realizing that something must be wrong. And I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror at my tired and somewhat pale face and realized I needed to call for help. I called a colleague in the psychiatry department and I asked him, Jamie, when can I see you? He said, Neha, how about 5 o'clock today? I said, how about now? He said, come right over. So I came over and I sat in his office, and it was only there after a few hours that I understood what was happening to me. I had literally gotten to the point that I could not process and function. I had become a danger to taking care of my own patients. This was a devastating day for me because I immediately, the type A personality in me, thought it was my fault. I thought I was a failure. I couldn't understand who would take care of all of these patients that were waiting. Jamie looked at me and he said, someone will take care of them, but I promise you, it won't be you. So I think one of the hardest things that I would tell you is, as somebody who is driven and passionate about her work and wants to help others, wants to be in service, I had made the mistake of thinking that I did not have limits, that more was better, that faster was better, that the more I took on of my colleagues' burdens, the better team player I would be in the hospital. But in fact, that day, I learned that I do have limits, that we all have limits. Even though I learned this in medical school, in physiology and pathology, and I learned about disease, I didn't think it applied to me. So I'd like each of you to take a moment and ask yourselves, do you drive yourself harder than you know is good? And if so, when you get tired, when you need a break, when one of your employees or team members tells you they can't meet a deadline or something that they miss a deadline or one of your expectations, what is your first thought to them, right? Is it, oh, they can't handle it? Is it, wow, we failed? Or is it a curiosity and empathy of putting things into a larger context? Have we been understaffed? Have I been asking more and more without the capacity and resources for my teams to be able to meet this? Is this a signal or a symptom that I should be paying attention to rather than blaming them? Well, as I left this psychiatrist's office, I thought I was going to be heading back to the hospital to finish seeing my patients. He said to me, someone will be seeing them and it won't be you. What I need you to do is this. And he handed me some prescriptions. He handed me prescriptions for Prozac, which takes care of depression, would heal depression, offered me the option to have an anti-anxiety medication. And he had heard I hadn't been sleeping well, as I shared with him. So he also gave me the option for a sleep medication. I just said I would take the Prozac, the depression medication, and I would fill that, but I didn't quite think I needed the other ones yet. As I was driving home, I was quite bewildered. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but as I looked at that Prozac prescription I had just filled, I thought to myself, I don't know what this is, but I don't think it's a Prozac deficiency. But I have to figure it out. He put me on leave for several months, for 2 months, to start getting my rhythms in my body back to normal. I had been working day shift some weeks and then night shifts the next week, sometimes 36-hour shifts when we were understaffed. What I did not realize is the cumulative effect on my body. So one of the most important things I'd like you to know is, even your medical professionals, while they take care of you, we have been schooled that more is better, faster is better, and saving lives of other people is more important than having boundaries of our own. And so taking a moment as a leader to notice in yourself where you drive yourself, and ultimately then how you drive your people. And taking a moment to reflect and notice, please in the Q&A chat, please write any judgments, any common judgments you've heard when someone else burns out or when someone else needs to go on stress leave, or during this time, the people who have been struggling. What common judgments in society have you heard or have you thought of yourself? Please put them in the Q&A chat. And as you do that, I will continue the story. And Jorge, feel free if there's something in the chat that you would like me to know, that you also share that with me, any of the judgments that people might be putting.
Okay, sure.
So I began researching burnout, and on my time off, it took me about 5 weeks to begin sleeping normally again. I had throat constriction in my throat that felt like I was always gasping for air. 5 weeks later, it started to subside. I was working straight through my own body. I was pushing through my body, not partnering with it. And ironically, in the name of helping other people heal. So as I began researching burnout, I'm going to share what I learned. If you're interested in understanding this story, understanding my journey of burnout, understanding tools that could be helpful to you and the people you care about, you already have the TalkRx audiobook. We gave it to you as a gift, and I would ask that it gets posted again in the chat right now as the audiobook and the code they need to use to get it for free. That's going to go as well in the chat. So in my research, what did I learn? I learned some very important things. I learned what burnout is. Burnout is a phenomenon that is actually not well understood. We are doing a lot of research on it now. So it's not exactly a physical diagnosis, although there are symptoms that I told you about. My throat constriction, my gasping for air, my inability to sleep, headaches, fatigue, all sorts of things that lead to physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. So those are some symptoms, right? Now, it's not a physical diagnosis officially. It's in fact, this might surprise many of you, it's an occupational phenomenon, a syndrome that is now emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. So where many people would want to blame an individual, they can't handle it, they can't take the workload, they're not strong enough, right? We need stronger people on our team. It's in fact not about that. So we'll talk about that at the end. It's in fact about the fit between the individual and your organization. So we need to look at both parts. So how do we define burnout? It's the triad of physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. The second piece of this is cynicism. Now, we need to carefully translate this for Spanish. Cynicism in this context with burnout is about feeling a sense of deep frustration, anger, helplessness, almost moving towards indifference, like you don't care. So an example of this, of course, you saw I was moving very slow in my work. I was exhausted. Secondly, the cynicism showed up now as I started to explore with this psychiatry colleague of mine. Each week I would go back and learn more. I realized a week prior to burning out, I was on call overnight and I was so tired. I had had a busy day. At 2 o'clock in the morning, one of the nurses called me and said, Dr. Sangwan, one of your patients is spiking a fever. And instead of the normal empathy and care that I would give to a patient feeling ill, I surprised myself and got angry. Oh, I cannot believe that this person spiked another fever. I was angry, I was upset, and I was starting to distance myself and become indifferent to the very work that I loved. So this is what we mean by cynicism, that you start to feel this mix of anger, frustration, and disconnect from your work. The third triad of burnout is literally when you become ineffective. So now, when does this happen? How do you know it's happening? Does it happen all of a sudden? No, it does not, although it may feel that way. Just like that day, I thought I was functioning just fine. Even though I was moving much slower than usual, I hadn't noticed. If the nurse hadn't asked me and told me that I had said something 4 times, I wouldn't have even known. So in that space, you start to lose sense of yourself. So let's talk about the phases in which burnout occurs. You may think you're busy, 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 and then you fall on your bed at night, but that's not how your biology works. Your own physiology occurs in phases. So it's very important that you recognize these phases of burnout in yourself as well as in others. The first phase of burnout is called the alarm phase. And the alarm phase is about the experience. It's almost like the experience of when you get on a treadmill and the treadmill's moving too quickly. It's almost a little bit of a panic. Your heart's racing, your breathing changes, and you work to catch up. For many of us in our careers, that alarm phase did not end. We continued into that alarm phase over time, and we move into the second phase of burnout called adaptation. Adaptation is when that alarm phase now becomes your regular way of life. You are always running. And ultimately in that, many of us spend the remainder of our careers and our lives here. And it's only when we get sick and have to be put in a hospital bed or become older through aging and are unable to move as much that we become more still. Or as in COVID last year, the pause button was hit on the world. And then we realized how fast we were moving. Many of us just adapted now to the online Zoom world at that same pace. Adaptation is a very dangerous place to stay because you know nothing else. It's almost like you think it's normal to be tired. That's why I went into the third and final phase of burnout, which is exhaustion, where literally I hit the wall of ineffectiveness. So this is a very important thing to understand, not only what is burnout, that it's this profound chronic exhaustion, mentally, emotionally, physically, cynicism, where you now start feeling yourself quick to anger or becoming indifferent to the work you care about, and you suddenly become ineffective and you think that it happened all of a sudden. But in fact, it has been this continuous process of phases. At each point, when you got the signal from your body, you did not pay attention. In fact, if you did pay attention, you have strategies to override them. And this brings us back to the body map. How do you know when this is all happening? This is why Raj does his presence practice with you. This is why getting quiet and doing a guided imagery, grounding yourself, becoming present and focusing inward as well as outward matters so deeply. So let's move into how do you know? These warning signs come early. And in your workbook, I'm going to show you 2 slides right now. And in your workbook, I would want you to know that they are there for your review. All these symptoms of fatigue and heart palpitations in the alarm phase can show up as someone anxious, irritated, right? Upset. But the way that you may see it in the workplace is someone who does not miss deadlines, starts missing deadlines, starts blaming other people. This is the more reactionary phase that they are in. When you move to the adaptation phase, the ways that this shows up is people are calling in sick, they're socially withdrawing, they have that cynicism, resentment, they become they have apathy where they disconnect. And in the exhaustion phase, now they are sliding down that slope that I spoke about, and they can become hopeless, ineffective, and ultimately even suicidal. The most important thing for you to know is any of these physical signals that show up from the earliest ones to the latest ones. Please do not look at burnout as your first solution. First, they go to a doctor to get a clear bill of physical health. If their physical health is clear, then you would want to entertain the ideas around burnout. And like I said, all of these pages of the warning signs of burnout are in your workbook for you to review. So let's talk about this. And you will explore these 6 drivers of burnout with your group, in your small group. You will go deeper and further into this. But if we shouldn't be blaming the individual, if in fact research by Christina Maslach on burnout, she's the foremost leader in research here, has revealed that there are actually drivers of burnout that are about the fit between personal factors and organizational factors. What are those? The first one is workload. Now, don't be mistaken by the simplicity of this word. The idea of workload does not mean just give your people less work to do. In fact, research suggests that optimal work experience occurs when your people are challenged, but they also feel that they have the capacity and the ability to meet those challenges. They become inspired by that. So the workload is very important for you to not just look at how many in medicine, how many patients did I see, but what was the complexity of the patients? How many procedures did I need to do when I was on shift? What about in my example where the week before I was working night shift and we were short staffed and then they had put me on days? I hadn't adjusted to that rhythm and I wasn't sleeping well. So pay attention to the workload. Make sure you challenge your people, but that they have the capacity and ability to meet that challenge. Otherwise, they start becoming deflated and burned out. The second driver of burnout is around how much input do your teams have on the decisions that affect them every day in their workflow, in their schedules, and their vacations. This is a very big deal, and you will especially be discussing this in the next section in your small group. Then there's recognition. So everyone needs to feel valued and appreciated, and not just at the annual event when there's a plaque and everyone's clapping, but every day, your everyday heroes in your company who make sure nothing goes wrong. If they do their job well, nothing goes badly or poorly. How are you recognizing them? Have you figured out ways to have your people recognize each other? Fourth is community. So community is a strong sense of community is crucial, right, for engagement, because people can transcend great hardship like COVID and if you've downsized, people can transcend all of that if they are working alongside people they care about and they feel cared for. So making sure that your teams have not just a work relationship, but also a personal caring relationship with one another. Next is fairness. This is a very big driver of burnout. So even if you're rewarding your people, let's say you're in a family-owned business and you have recognition happening, but people feel that how those decisions are made are not transparent or fair. And this can happen in any type of a business, really. Well, the fairness will undermine the recognition that you're giving. So this is about transparency and decision making. It's about mistakes when they're made. Is there blame or is there curiosity? So fairness, very big one. Meaning is the final one. So this is about alignment between the values you say your company stands for and the environment in which your people work. If there's not alignment in this, there's a big difficulty that we have.